good afternoon, everybody. My name is TianHui. I am the music director of the Victory Players, which is based here in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And we are a contemporary music ensemble that is a piano plus percussion setup. So that's 6 musicians in total. In addition to that, I'm music director of Whitesnake Projects in Boston and music director of Pioneer Valley Symphony, which is out here in Western Massachusetts as well. It's great to be here with you this afternoon. I'm so sorry that I'm not able to be there in person, and I might sound a little congested because I was unfortunately diagnosed with COVID on Tuesday. And so I'm feeling obviously okay, but I wish I was there. You know, it was actually one of the highlights of the start of my summer season to meet all of you. And it's really a great loss not to meet with you and to have all of those kind of corridor conversations and post-concert drinks and just to learn more about your music and so on. I was invited to talk about my work with the Victory Players. But before I do that, I want to introduce my colleague here, who is Jorge Sosa.
So I am here, and this is all a little bit improvised because, you know, we're going to get together here and chat and sort of develop this presentation. But that, of course, didn't happen. So we are improvising as best as we can. But my name is Jorge Sosa. I am a composer from Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico City, although I've been living in the United States for 20 years. I live in New York. I'm an associate professor at Molloy College, an associate professor of music. And my sort of specialties are, well, a little varied, but I do opera for the last sort of 10 years. I've been doing a lot of operatic works, including premieres with Whitesnake Projects, and then technology. So I actually do electronic music and sometimes electronic music and opera. So the reason why Tian and myself got connected was through our collaborations during the pandemic. Actually, Tian is one of my closest collaborators, and we've only met in person once. But we've done a lot of Zoom work.
I mean, this is just such an extraordinary time, isn't it? I mean, Jorge Sosa, Jorge and me, we met at the premiere of his opera, I'm a Dreamer Who No Longer Dreams, which of course speaks, you know, directly to the Dreamer Act, you know, and it was something that was very close to everybody's hearts. And I didn't get to have the privilege of conducting the performance of that, but only just like a sneak preview of that with Juventus New Music Ensemble in Boston. And I just remember being in the audience weeping buckets. The story, the music, everything was just so powerful that I had wanted to work with Jorge ever since. And then the pandemic happened and we ended up collaborating very closely for what was the first fully virtually staged opera of the pandemic, we believe, which is Alice in the Pandemic. And, you know, and a big kudos over to Jorge Sosa because he wrote that opera in, I think, 3 weeks. You know, I think a 60-minute opera in 3 weeks, and it then went on to win acknowledgement by the Library of Congress as one of the best works of American art during the pandemic. And so, you know, like that's just a fabulous accomplishment. And you know, and fast forward to this project that we're working together. And I thought what I would do is to give everybody some context to how this project came about. And it's really, really closely tied to the Victory Players. Now, the Victory Players are relatively new as a new music ensemble. They have been around since 2015. And as with these kind of very grassroots funded organization, things move very slowly at the beginning. And so it took us a while before we could really, really get started. And we had the opportunity to gather as an ensemble because of the Massachusetts International Festival of the Arts, which is based here in Holyoke, Massachusetts. It's a very unusual city in the sense that almost 45% of its population is of Puerto Rican origin. So that makes it the highest concentration of Puerto Ricans outside of Puerto Rico itself proper in the whole of the United States. The interesting thing, of course, is that what I didn't say earlier is I'm associate professor of music and at Mount Holyoke College. So I'm part of this 5 college network that includes Amherst College, Smith College, Hampshire College, and UMass Amherst, University of Massachusetts Amherst. And we always talked about how there seemed to be a tofu curtain. On one side was all the universities and the organic farms and art galleries and yoga studios, and on the other side was everybody else of color and everybody else who was doing art of any sort. And there was no meeting in the middle at all. And I felt that if the festival approached me to come up for music ensemble, that I should honor its location, I should honor its people, I should honor the culture and the conversations that people desperately want to have in the community. And so began this project of forming an ensemble. And I looked around, because we're in Massachusetts, we're surrounded by orchestras, we're surrounded by early music ensembles, we're surrounded by string quartets of every imagination. But believe it or not, in our area, there was no permanent new music ensemble. And to their credit, you know, because not so many people say yes to this when you say, let's form a new music ensemble, and they say, yes, let me give you money to do that, right? So that's very, very unusual. But together with the Davis Foundation, we were able to kind of get the seed funding of that. And the whole project has been a process of kind of bringing community collaborators together to make every step possible. Our first conversation that I felt that we had to have was with the Puerto Rican population because of demographics, because they've been so systemically excluded from cultural conversations in my area for a very long time. And so what we looked at the formats of various kinds of summer festivals and composer residencies and new music ensembles around. And I felt that there were a couple of things that we could use this opportunity for. One was the dearth of opportunities for very, very highly trained musicians at the top of their game, graduating from the top conservatories of the world and not quite finding that place in the world where they had a tenured position, right? Think about the tenured position in whether it's the New York Phil or whether it's at a college. It is very, very hard to get by. And also there are lots of things that music conservatories don't do. And, you know, and there's this catch-22 thing of we need you to have experience, but what kind of experience? And you can't get into positions to get that experience unless you already have the experience. So how do we break this cycle that is effectively excluding a lot of different voices? So right from the outset, we were thinking of modeling ourselves under what is now Ensemble Connect, which is based at Carnegie Hall. And so we auditioned the best of the best in the country. And those people who really, really shared a joint vision of working interculturally with us and with disadvantaged neighborhoods in my city kind of rose to the forefront. And just to give you a sense of it, if you can imagine, you go for a new music ensemble and on audition, in addition to playing spectacularly, the first thing you're asked at your interview is, what is new music's role in dealing with the social issues of our time? And how do you see yourself as a part of it? So that gives you a sense of the kind of people that then kind of rose to the top of this process, but also our conscious efforts to bridge that gap. Because then there's also this kind of, you know, what some folks have called the savior complex of people with these opportunities to go into communities and say, I have the money, I have the solutions, you listen to me. And we wanted to really kind of invert that. And so we went into the community and said, we have this opportunity. We think that the way we could use this opportunities with a new music ensemble. What would you like to see? So we met up with grassroots organizations, we met up with school teachers. And the thing that came up again and again was that, well, you know, the Puerto Rican population is the biggest portion of our demographics, but we have a lot of Guatemalans, we have a lot of Mexican Americans, we have a lot of recent immigration. And because there's such an availability of Spanish language resources in the area, it's also attracting people from other places who speak Spanish, right? Because they can walk into the supermarket and they can get the stuff that they need, you know, as opposed to going somewhere else, you know. So there was a lot in the community that was like this, but in schools, they said to me that they were really, really short of materials that celebrated this culture. And that every single time that they played something that was either, you know, coming from a Puerto Rican or Mexican or Mexican-American root, that it had profound impacts on the students. And, you know, and this was something that we saw in our work. So in addition to performing concerts in the community, we also do meet the composer sessions. We also do school visits, and we have education programming for elementary, middle, and high school. And the reason we do that too is because a lot of these highly trained professionals don't necessarily have the tools to communicate across different kinds of demographics, right? And I strongly felt that, in order to bridge that gap, it was involved welcoming these communities in, but also teaching and sharing with musicians how to actually interact with these folks. So we have teacher mentors and collaborators at each of these schools who actually came in and said to us, well, it's a little bit different when you're talking to 5-year-olds, so that rhythm exercise that you're planning totally doesn't work. That was like, and we put the onus of planning these interactions also with the musicians so that they can gather the skills. And to the extent that I can, I try to step further and further back from it so that there is really authentic engagement and problem solving by the musicians with the community. And so we're very happy at this point to say that that first project together resulted in 10 commissions of composers kind of engaging with the subject of Puerto Rico. And I put it vaguely like this. And when we started on this project, it was before Hurricane Maria. It was before all the stuff that happened politically during the previous administration. It was in 2014, 2015 when I proposed this. But I wanted to return to the fact that Puerto Rico as is the oldest place in the United States where classical music first kind of began. It has the oldest conservatory, it has the oldest unbroken musical tradition, because that's one of the first places that colonization started, right? So, and that its name itself was something that people didn't understand, because I would step in an Uber and talk to people and I say, oh yeah, these Puerto Ricans, and I said, do you know anything about them other than the fact that they like colorful, they like bright colors? And the truth was people didn't know. They didn't even know what Puerto Rico meant. It meant the rich port, and that it was such a contrast, that association with negative stuff. And I said, this is where culture can be particularly effective here. Let us come up with something that changes the conversation. Let's highlight the stories of success, role models, and for everybody in the community, including young people. And I'm happy to say that at this point, we have our first record deal with those 10 compositions. So all those 10 composers will be recorded and professionally produced. We have entered partnerships with New England Public Media, and through them with GBH Music. And at the moment, we are on the second episode of a 10-part video series with GBH Music. We have produced a radio program that's available to all public radio stations across the country. We have produced a TV program version of this, which is available through Public Broadcasting Service, PBS. And it's also going to come out as a podcast, and it is already available as a radio show, as I said. So that, we're really amplifying this story. And in many ways, people would have said that this is so unlikely, because what is Holyoke, Massachusetts? And how is it possible that there's all this stuff, but it does speak to what is possible when a lot of people come together and to support a vision. And so I feel like we have had a tremendous amount of community support. We have been working with Nueva Esperanza, for example, which is a kind of after-school programs that helps the community get students into college and off the streets. We've been working with Nuestra Raíces, which is kind of a food justice organization. We've been working closely also with the mayor's office to make sure that things like that reach out, and the local schools as well, and also the Holyoke Public Library and El Sol Latino, which is the Spanish language newspaper in our city. And we've been working with them on tons of different grant projects. So I can say that whatever success you see is the tip of the iceberg of failed applications that we are put out, because that's how it goes, right? You apply for 10 things, maybe you get one. And that then brings us to this very exciting new chapter, because I feel, that it was all well and good to start engaging with our Puerto Rican community, but they're really, Puerto Rico does not exist in cultural isolation from other places. As much as it interacts with mainland America, it also interacts with Spanish language culture of all sorts. And one of the most wonderful conversations I had in the very first year of residency, and I maybe can speak more about the model that we use, but one of the things that I believe in is that everything begins with a relationship. If you cannot cultivate a human connection with the composers to the performers, to the public, to everybody, then it's very hard for something like this to really take fruit and to like really kind of blossom in everybody's imagination. And I remember these wonderful evenings over margaritas and red wine, talking about the music that the composers were listening to. And of course, it's an eclectic mix. And of course, it had music from all over, including, and it's followed like a 3-year obsession for me with the music of Natalia Lafourcade. And I just, ended up like falling into this rabbit hole of Mexican pop, and Spanish language popular music, which, by the way, funnily enough, was also something that was a huge part of my childhood in Singapore, which was full of Spanish language popular music, except that we didn't understand a word. We just loved the rhythms, we loved the music. So it's this very pure, innocent love of the music, if you can. And just to show how close the connections are, the sound engineer that's working with us, Johan Rashi Vega, who from Holyoke Public Media, is from Mexico, moved to Puerto Rico and worked at the public radio station there for 10 years, became a naturalized US citizen there, and now lives in Holyoke and works with us. So, right, it just goes to show the closeness of these connections. And if we wanted to do this, and I have to say part of this was because I know Jorge. And I've been dreaming of more ways to sit down with him for days on end and just explore his fantastic musical imagination and see what is possible. And so I will absolutely confess that even the subject of what this is, of the coming festival that we're running starting on Monday, actually, Si Se Puede, is actually Jorge's imagination and title. So I'm going to turn things over to Jorge to just talk a little bit about that now.
Yeah, so thank you. So, sorry. So Tian, we started talking about this idea, and now we're going to do this type of festival. We're going to invite Mexican composers, Mexican American composers, and so the first thing we need is kind of a title. In Puerto Rico, it was very clear that it was going to be about the rich port, and it was going to be about that tradition. So we started thinking, and the phrase. Actually, sort of the very first idea was, well, obviously immigration. The issue of immigration so present in our collective psyche, and you see it on the news, and it's the horrors of immigration. There are horror stories. Of course, there are success stories that are beautiful and that they don't get told all the time. So I really wanted to do something, come up with a title or a concept that was positive, that would present Mexican music and Mexican artists and Mexican migrants in a positive light. And so for me, one of those very positive phrases is Si Se Puede. Si Se Puede is it's our war chant, right? It's a way, it's a phrase that we use to sort of pep talk ourselves into that we can do great things, that we can be composers, we can be whoever we want to be. We can be tenure professors in universities. We can teach in foreign languages. We can do all these things. Si se puede, si podemos. So curiously enough, I started looking at Si Se Puede and where that history comes from. And actually, it comes from Dolores Huerta. Dolores Huerta, who was a community organizer in Los Angeles, who worked with the Farmers Union, organizing the Farmers Union with Cesar Huerta in 1965. And she is the one that is sort of been acknowledged as being the one that coined the term Si Se Puede. Of course, when I heard it, it was in 1999 at a soccer stadium, at the final of the Confederaciones Cup, and Mexico is going down, and we need to win this game, and the whole stadium starts chanting Si Se Puede. Of course, years later, you see Barack Obama taking that chant and translating it, yes, we can. So it's interesting how this idea of yes, we're able to do this has come from LA back to Mexico City, back to Chicago, and Obama, someone who's very knowledgeable about unions and about obviously knew that history. And then so we wanted to appropriate that and own it as our own title for this project.
We were, of course, were navigating a wonderful grant landscape. And so it was, we were very relieved to learn that we could actually open up the the process to anybody who wants to apply. In fact, we were, initially, we really wanted to make sure that we got Mexican-American stories from, with authenticity. And that often meant reaching out to people who are in that journey somehow, either identifying as Mexican or Mexican-American. And funnily enough, it ran against kind of non-discrimination legislation in grant writing. So, we ended up opening it up to everybody, and we were far richer for that, actually, and I think, that also meant that it arrived in more people's inboxes, because this all depends on word of mouth for the success of the program. And so what we're going to have right now is, and this is the model that I've developed since the first project, which is that the composers come for a 2-week residency, and of course we have flexibility because especially this is a busy time, and not every single person can actually come for 2 weeks for various reasons. It could be childcare. We had somebody who just delivered a young baby a few years ago, and we learned all about that. And we also are committed to the fact that if you want to really advocate for all of these so-called underrepresented voices, then you have to be prepared to do the extra work. That this means that we are going to set things up technologically that makes it possible for people to come in and to try to raise money to help people to afford transport fees and so on. So composers come for 2 weeks in the fullest version of this, and in the first week, it is an opportunity to get to know the ensemble and to just to fire up the imagination and to build relationships. So we start with open rehearsals and open discussions, and then we move on into a process by which composers can meet with each of the 6 members of the ensemble individually and to try out new ideas. And we're very open about this too. It doesn't have to all lead to a composition for us. The composer can come with, one composer came with, I remember a catalog, 40 fragments for something like 6 or 7 different commission projects. And they just wanted to test out the effects of whatever for whatever instrument, whether the extended technique works exactly the way they want to. Somebody came in and did experiments on how the different timbre and frequencies resulted in different overtones, and really wanted that to be a part of that composition. But some people were just testing out different kind of orchestrational concepts, and some people were testing out things like how idiomatic is my musical concept for the players and whether that works or not. So so there's small kind of individual discussions, then we move on to kind of small group discussions, and it's different for every single composer. It's up to what they would like to do, and eventually, hopefully all of this feeds into their imagination and think, okay, out of the different ideas that I brought, the idea that I think would be a great fit for not just the victory players, but for Giovanni Perez, the flute player, because he is this kind of a flutist who loves this, who has a sweet spot here and has a fantastic instrument, this, there, is that I'm going to write this kind of part for him, and that everything is really kind of, in that sense, written for the players with full knowledge of exactly who's going to actually perform it at the end of the day. And then I start coming to the process of leading kind of readings of it. And composers throughout this process are writing, and they have access to a practice room, every single one of them. They have accommodation, and they have the opportunity to make community with each other. Because that's the other thing, I think even in this setting, talking to Jorge, I think this is the first time that we've seen all of your esteemed names, but we haven't had the chance to meet you, which is the reason why I'm really hurting for not being there, because I really wanted to meet you more than anything else. So, and the idea is that we all sit down, we have dinner, we have drinks, we talk in between, we get to know each other's lives and stories, and eventually the music is so much richer for it. And in the second week, we move towards the performance end of things, and the players themselves are usually premiering about 3 or 4 pieces from the previous year. So we tend to do like 3 or 4 composers every single year. And then for this process, and then we also do all of our school performances and our public engagement efforts at that point. So, so I'm going to turn over to Jorge to talk about his piece for Si Se Puede.
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention also some of the colleagues that are going to be in the, in the first round. So for this particular concert, we have Andres Ballesteros, who's based in Boston. He's a Mexican-American composer. Cody Quasquel Badillo. Marina Lopez, who's also has been very much in contact with Whitesnake projects, and I've never met her, so I'll be excited to meet her. Felipe Perez Santiago, who's another Mexican colleague, and we actually went to music school together. And myself, and then Leah Maria Villarreal is the other composer. She's based out in LA. And so for this piece, actually, I kind of wrote my piece during the pandemic, and then it's been sitting in the drawer because we didn't know when it was gonna when we were gonna be able to make it work. The title of the piece is Rocola, which means jukebox, and the piece is about one of my favorite things to do, which is to head down to downtown Mexico City and gather in the cantina and sip mezcal or tequila and put your pesos in the jukebox and listen to music. And it's also kind of like a music history lesson because it has music from the 30s, from the 50s. So for me, you know, we talk a lot about folk music, but my connection to traditional music is the urban setting, is the dance halls, it's the cantinas, it's a different type of traditional music. So the three movements, the first one is called Cancion De Cantina, which it really focuses on the style of music from the film that we saw from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the macho with the, so it's kind of playing on that idea, obviously more from my perspective as you know, not as a film character, but it draws on that lyrical tradition. The second movement is a cumbia, because even though cumbias are from Colombia, they are deeply rooted in Mexico City culture. Whenever you go to a wedding, you better have your dance shoes on and you better be ready to dance some cumbias. And then the third movement is called ska. And ska, as a mixture of punk rock and sort of Latin, mostly Caribbean dances, that became sort of the backdrop for a lot of the social movements of the late 90s and into the 2000s as we were striving to achieve a more open and democratic society in Mexico. So bandas como Café Tacuba, Maldita Vecindad, Tijuana No, that were really important, and a really important voice in that time period. So I wanted to pay homage to that music and try and harness some of that raw power and energy.
You know, there was one important part I forgot to mention, which is that part of our approach is to acknowledge how little we know about this music and this musical culture. And so everybody's coming with this, you know, kind of openness to learn. And it's actually built into our session. So in the first week of the residency, we often invite an artist teacher who is going to come and share about the music. And in this case, because of the pandemic, we're slightly out of sync with everything. We actually have Bomba Daki, which is a bomba group based here in Holyoke, and Brenda Cepeda is from the Cepedas, which is one of the familias of bomba in Puerto Rico, and she's coming to give us a workshop on, and so it's, you know, I was just talking with her about this. So what are we looking to do? We're looking to understand all the things that are beyond the printed page. Because of course, you know, there's all this stuff about performance practice, about the feel of something that goes beyond just the printed notes. And that often is coming from the dance, from the visual aspects of it, from the history of it, from the background of where the dance comes from and how it is currently used or practiced today. So I look forward to working closely with Jorge and the rest of the composers, because next year we will invite somebody to share with us some of this musical references that he was just talking about. So I know we're almost exactly at time. We have a minute. I don't know whether there's room in this format for questions, but you know, I just wanted to kind of open it up.
Any questions? Brian can field. It is next Saturday at Mount Holyoke.
Also, for asking about the residency, the residency for us always begins after Memorial Day. So it's Tuesday is when people start arriving, even before. And then it goes all the way for 2 weeks. And we usually have a culminating performance on a Friday and Saturday of the second week. So that would be, in this case, the 10th and the 11th of June.
And you can find more if you Google MIFA Victory Players. You will see information there that will lead you to ticket sales. So yes, please join us. Good to see you, Tian.